Well, hello and welcome once again, everybody. This is SQL Dan, and tonight we're looking at some more features of the Snowflake database and SQL. Tonight, in particular, we're going to look at the keyword like and another new one that's been introduced by Snowflake, and that will be called ILIKE. But we'll start with like, and we'll build up from there. So I have a table here, and it contains this actually came from a real example that I had at one point, a list of tables. And the accounting department had set out to differentiate their tables from the others in the database by always using the prefix GL on the front of them. So I wanted to find a way to be able to query all of those out and group them together and do whatever I needed to do for the accounting department. And so this is obviously just a small set of data to help us to understand the problem that popped up here. So we have 7 records, and we can see them there. Some of them start with GL, some of them don't. Some of them are uppercase, and some of them are lowercase. So when I wanted to query out all of the records that begin with GL, I thought the easiest way to do it might be just to add a where clause that says where table name is like GL underscore, and then use the wildcard percent to get everything after that. And when I ran that query, I was surprised to see that I had a few records that didn't meet what I thought was the criterion that I had established, which was essentially that it should start with G, L, and underbar. And what I'd forgotten in this particular case was that the underbar is actually a wildcard with the like of in and of itself. Most people who use like know that the percent sign is a wildcard, but the underbar is also a wild card that matches a single character. So the first 3 are ones that I wanted to select, but the last 2 there, global accounts and glitch log, I didn't want to get, but because the O from global and the I from glitch are a single character, they matched. So it turned out that that wasn't the best approach in order to solve the problem. So the way that I solved this for them, at least at the time, was to add a requirement to the query that the third character had to be an underbar. So I just did it with a substring like this and say field name begin at character 3 and 1 character, and it must equal the underbar. Okay, so now I have a like that's selecting that, and then I have a particular thing that's really honing in on that third character to say make sure it's an underbar. And that worked pretty good for the purposes at the time that I did it. Now the limitations here are that if there was ever a variable number of characters where maybe the underbar isn't always in the third position, perhaps they also had GLX or something like that, then this particular query wouldn't work. So after this, the only way to really do it with any efficiency would be to do it with regular expressions. I'm not going to get into regular expressions on this particular lesson. We'll save that one for another one. But you can see the problem that I ran into. Well, Snowflake has solved this problem by allowing us to escape the wildcard characters and say that they stand in for themselves. So this is the query that I have here. Let me copy it, paste it down. I'm going to remove that right here. And after my like, okay, I'm going to add the keyword escape and 2 single quotes. And now I can put any character I want into here. We'll put a $sign, for example, okay? And we're going to say the $sign is my escape character. And what escape means, it means that if we have characters that have special meaning or meta characters, okay, treat them not as meta characters, but treat them as just themselves right here. So I defined my escape character to be a $sign. A $sign appeared in my string, and so now it says whatever character is immediately after that, it's no longer a special meta character, it stands for itself. And this also works pretty well. I get the 3 records that I want to see here, the ones that start with GL and underscore. So nice job, Snowflake. That works out really well. You may remember, however, that when I first showed you this data set, that there's actually another table in here that begins with GL, although it wasn't in uppercase. So let's take another look here. And we see we have down here on record 6, we have GL underscore XML doc written in lowercase. And so this did not select that. Typically, the way that I've always gotten around this in the past would just be to, well, one way that you could do it, this isn't the way that I've usually done it, but one way that could be done is that you could add an OR, and you could make a second one using lowercase characters like so. Okay, so now we can say it can be uppercase GL or lowercase GL. And in this case, I now pick up that record that I wanted to pick up. Now, if for some reason, I have some input sources that are not the best in the world, and maybe I have a capital G and a lowercase l or vice versa, this still isn't going to work, and I would have to put more combinations in. So this isn't really the most efficient way to go about this. And so the way that this problem is usually solved is to use the upper function and place it around the field that has the variability in the case of the characters. And so now this upper is raising every value that appears in this field to uppercase, only for the purposes of the comparison, right? So when it compares that GL XML doc, it's raised to uppercase GL and uppercase XML and uppercase doc, and then the comparison happens. Although when we get the record back, it still appears, in lowercase. So this upper just applies for purposes of the comparison, and this is the way that we've usually solved that problem. Well, Snowflake has an even better way to go about this that I really like, okay, and that is they've introduced a new function. So let's bring this down once again, clean it up. Let's remove the upper once again, okay, to get it back to here. And so now we're back to the point where it's going to select only the uppercase ones. Well, instead of using the keyword like, we can use the new one called ILIKE. 5 letters all together, no spaces, no other punctuation, just ILIKE, like that, which stands for insensitive case like. And when we do that, now the comparison works, and it finds any old letter G and any old letter L, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, and then it finds the underbar because we have the escape on here. So the ILIKE also works with the escape. If we were to remove the escape temporarily, let's do that, we would see that my underbar now becomes a meta character again, just like with like. The same thing happens with ILIKE, and so we picked up also this one called glue procs. So ILIKE works with or without the escape, depending on your need. And I meant to also say, I originally escaped this with a $sign. I always recommend that if you're going to use a character like this for escaping or for for any sort of a thing like this, you always want to use a character that's not going to appear in your string. And really my favorite of all of these is the tilde by itself, because even in languages that use a tilde, like in Spanish and Portuguese, for example, the tilde never appears by itself. It always appears as part of a character. So this is a really good one to use as your escape character. So earlier I was using $sign, but now I'm going to use the tilde instead. So I put it right here in front of the underbar. And now we should be able to select all of these records that start with GL. So that's That's fantastic. So that's um, the the first two innovations that we see now with Snowflake and ILIKE. We can escape metacharacters and we can get case insensitive likes. But still, there's more that we can do with it. And what I'd like to do now is have a second like condition. For example, let's say that we wanted to find all of the records that contained either an O or a C. Okay, and so you can kind of scan down through that list right there. And so typically the way that we would do this normally would be to write two different like conditions. So here's one where we're going to have a percent and then a capital O and then a C. I'm sorry, and then a percent sign. Okay, which means there can be text before the O and then there's an O, and there can be text after the O. All right, and we also want to have a second one with an and the second one says it has to have a C. Okay, and by doing it this way, it doesn't mean the O has to come before the C or the C has to come after the O or anything like that. It's just the string has to contain an O and it has to contain a C. So in this case, we found three strings that meet that condition, and that's the way that we've always handled this in the past. Well, Snowflake has added another keyword to the like statement. So select from, and here's my table name. All right, tables. There we go. Where table name like, and here's where the new keyword comes in right here. All, okay, and then we put our patterns that it's going to match. Now, because we have more patterns, we now need to use parentheses. Normally, we don't need parentheses with a like or with an ILIKE. Okay, but in this case, because we have more than one pattern, okay, we have to enclose them in parentheses. So there's my first one, a percent O, a percent, and here's percent C percent. Okay, so like all, and that means it has to match all of the patterns that I have in this list. And I think the limit is 255. Don't quote me on that, but it's definitely at least two, which is what I have here. And what do I got going on? Oh, I have two of those right there. Okay, and so all of these are the same three that we saw when we ran the query just above. And all of these records contain a C and an O both. Now there's one more possibility I want to show you, and that is, what if instead of we want records that contain an and like this, let's say we had an or. So in this case, I'm going to look for all the records that contained an O or an S. It doesn't have to contain both. It either has to contain an S or it has to contain an O. And we see the records that we got here. Okay. And we have GL users, for example. There's no O in there, but there is an S. Okay. And so that's my like with this one. And so Snowflake has a way that we can do this with a shortcut as well. So before we had like all, but we could also use like any. And we can provide patterns, and all it has to do in this case is match one pattern, and then the record gets selected. So here's my query that I just wrote a minute ago, right? And I have, I want to see all the ones that contain an O, all the ones that contain an S. Again, they don't have to contain both because I used any. And we can see that the records were selected. And even with any and all, we can still use ILIKE instead of like. So we'll do that. And we'll see that we picked up this one here because it has an O, and this one here that has an S. So the very last thing that I'd like to show you is, what do we do if we actually want to find a percent sign in the data? So I'm going to show you that one here. and I have a different data set. And I usually hate it when people name their data set my table or my field. And I had, excuse me, I had originally created one that was different, and it looked too confusing. So I decided, I'll keep it this way because that way it's really clear that these aren't keywords or anything like that. So here's my table, okay, and it has a field in it called my field. And notice that 3 of the records contain a percent sign. And what if I wanted to select out and find that percent sign? So we might be tempted to say like percent. And when we run that, oh, I forgot to put the where clause here. Where my field like percent. And this still returned all the records from the table, including this one that didn't have a percent sign in it. So what happened? Well, as I selected these, I just put a simple percent sign in here, which of course is a wildcard that matches anything, which means that every field matched it. So that wasn't quite what I needed to do, and you probably guessed that I needed to escape it in some way. So I'm going to use the escape, and I'm going to go ahead and use the tilde like I demonstrated a minute ago. Okay, and I am going to put the tilde right there before the percent sign. Now when I do this, my hope is that I'm going to get 3 of them with the percent sign, but spoiler alert, there's still a problem. As we see here, when I run it, the query returned no results at all. So I still have a problem, and the problem is that I have now just selected, the only thing that would match is something that contains a percent sign all by itself. In other words, this where clause looks an awful lot like if I were to write this right here, where my field like, say letter F, like this, right? This one would only match if it was an F all by itself with nothing before it or nothing after it, because I have to have percent signs to say there could possibly be stuff after it and there could possibly be stuff before it. So that applies right here. Even though I've escaped this percent sign, I now have to put another percent sign after and another percent sign before it. So this escape character is really only escaping the second percent sign that you see out of the 3. The first one is still a meta character. The last one is still a meta character. I know, a little confusing, but when I do that, you'll see that we actually get the 3 records that I now wanted. And let's say, for example, that I remove this last percent sign. Yeah, that's right. And I run this, and in this case, I only get the 1, okay? Because now I have a percent sign, which is a meta character that says whatever can be in front of it. Then there has to be a percent sign, but nothing else can be after it because I don't have another percent sign. So I hope you found this useful. I hope there was some good information in here. I hope you learned a little bit about some cool functionality that's in Snowflake. We took a look at ILIKE and ILIKE, and we talked about case sensitivity and doing it case insensitive. We found a way to escape the meta characters, and we learned how to use any and all to look for more than one pattern within the string. I hope if I've got anything wrong or if you have any questions, you leave me some comments here. And if you have some ideas for things you'd like me to explain in the future, I'd be happy to take those on as well. But as for now, I say thank you for watching. This is SQL Dan, and I will talk to you next time.